They said it was a celebration, a small one. Nothing fancy, just cake and coffee in the teacher's lounge. My name was written in pink frosting, slightly smudged, the kind that comes from a grocery store rush job. Happy retirement. Nora, it read, as if the font itself was trying to sound cheerful. No students, no farewell hugs. Just a few colleagues glancing at their watches, saying polite things like you'll finally get to relax while inching toward the door. And Melanie. She stood there with her purse still on her shoulder, as if she had somewhere better to be. My stepdaughter. My late husband's only child. The one I had raised since she was 12. She handed me a paper envelope along with the cake. I thought maybe it was a card. It wasn't. It's an appointment, she said. There's this amazing senior living place by the beach sea breeze. I scheduled a tour for you next week, just to take a look. Her voice had that crisp, careful tone I recognized from every time she wanted something she already decided. You deserve comfort now, she added, and smiled. I held the envelope like it might burn. The frosting on the cake was too sweet. My coffee had gone cold. I sat in the lounge a while after everyone left, just me and the leftover cake. I traced the rim of the paper plate with my thumb and looked at the old bookshelf in the corner. I used to keep stickers and storybooks there, used to sit cross-legged on the carpet with my students, read them tales about brave girls who fought dragons and gentle grandmothers who saved the day. The shelves were half empty now. The dragons had gone silent. The grandmother had been sent home or somewhere quieter. That evening, I walked back to the house I'd lived in for over 30 years. Every brick, every floorboard still carried echoes of laughter, scraped knees, bedtime songs. Melanie used to draw on the kitchen wall with crayon I never painted over it. I liked remembering the small rebellions. But the lights inside felt different that night, like the house knew before I did. There were new folders on the dining table. Melanie's handwriting, neat and permanent, sat on labels that read property transfer, advanced care planning, and power of attorney signed. I didn't remember signing anything. But I must have sometime between surgeries and grief and too much trust. I stood there in the dim light, one hand still holding the envelope she gave me. A retirement cake, a tour date, a home that no longer felt like mine. And all I could think was this: they didn't take me out of my home. They just made sure I couldn't find my way back in. I wasn't pushed out of my home, I just wasn't given the door code anymore. Before she was the woman with a clipboard and a polite smile. Melanie was a 12-year-old with tangled hair and fists clenched in her lap, staring at me across the dinner table like I was an unwanted guest in her life. I didn't blame her. Her mother had died just 2 years earlier, and my George was doing his best to hold both their hearts together while learning how to love again. When we married, he asked me not just to be his wife, but to be her mother. And I said yes, not because I needed children, but because I believed love could be taught. So I packed away my books on French poetry. I gave up the dream of a writing sabbatical in Vermont, and I poured every ounce of softness I had left into that child. I braided her hair even when she pulled away. I made her lunchboxes with handwritten notes inside. You've got this, and today is already proud of you. I learned the names of her favorite pop stars and painted her bedroom walls lavender because she once said it made her feel safe. She never called me Mom. Not even once. She called me Nora like a neighbor. But I stayed. I stayed through the silence, the eye rolls, the slammed doors. When George got sick, it was me who sat by his bed every night reading aloud from old gardening magazines because his eyes were too tired to follow fiction. It was me who signed the hospice papers. Me who told Melanie, trembling and furious, that her father wasn't coming home. And when the funeral ended and everyone else went back to their lives, it was me who found her on the kitchen floor 2 days later, curled into herself, whispering that she didn't know how to breathe without him. I wrapped my arms around her then, held her through it, thinking maybe now, maybe this is the moment she'll see me. Not as a placeholder, not as some quiet woman in her father's orbit, but as the one who never left. That night, she let me sit on the edge of her bed while she fell asleep. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say anything, but I took that silence like sunlight. Years passed. Melanie grew older, moved out, found her own rhythm, and I stayed in the same house, the one George built with his own 2 hands. I fixed the roof twice. I repainted the porch swing when the wood started to crack. I taught school full-time, attended PTA meetings alone, paid off the mortgage in small, determined bites. My son, Alan, lived states away, wrapped in a life that didn't have much room for frequent phone calls. I never minded. I told myself he was building his own legacy, that I was better off not needing much. I spent holidays hosting dinner for neighbors who didn't have family nearby. I saved up every penny I could, dreaming one day I'd travel, maybe finally write that book of essays I started drafting in my 20s. I kept the photo of George and Melanie on my nightstand, even after she stopped coming around. And when she returned in my 60s, saying she wanted to help out, I believed her. I made her tea every afternoon. I offered to teach her how to make George's favorite stew. I showed her where I kept the important papers, the passwords, the insurance files. I thought this is the part where love comes back full circle, but I didn't realize love isn't always a circle. Sometimes it's a long straight line, and you're the only one still walking. I had become a woman defined by what she gave away: time, sleep, energy, decades of patience. I was the keeper of birthday memories, the one who made things work when they broke, the one who never asked for applause. When I retired, my classroom cried harder than my family. My students made a card 3 feet wide with glitter and stickers and little drawings of me holding books. Melanie didn't see it. She said she was busy. And so, I packed up 30 years of chalk-stained blouses, sticky notes with child handwriting, and a small bell I used to ring every Monday morning. I walked into the quiet house that evening thinking, at least I still have this. At least I still have the kitchen table where George once sang off-key to celebrate the first mortgage payment. The hallway where Melanie practiced for her 8th grade recital. The guest room with a sunbeam that always hit just right at 9 a.m. This was my museum, my cathedral, my living memory. But love, when unseen for too long, becomes invisible even to itself. And I didn't know it yet, but I was about to learn what happens when the people you gave everything to decide that your time is up. Not with cruelty, not with a scream, but with frosting on a cake and an appointment to see your replacement. They didn't say I was done. They just stopped saving me a seat. It didn't happen all at once. The way floods don't announce themselves until the water's already reached the floorboards. At first, it was small things: Melanie offering to help organize my files, asking where I kept my medical records, suggesting we streamline the clutter in the house, just in case something happens, she said lightly, flipping through my kitchen drawer like it was a stranger's junk. I laughed at first, teased her for being paranoid, but she didn't laugh back. She brought brochures from places with names like Silver Shore Living and Sunrise Retreat. The photos showed old women with white teeth smiling under perfect lighting, holding hands with strangers in coordinated cardigans. This one has ocean views, Melanie pointed out, as if waves could replace a garden I had grown with my own hands. I told her I wasn't ready. She tilted her head, said nothing, just tapped her nail against the pamphlet like she was keeping time. Then came the comments about the stairs, how they were steep, how I might fall, how Alan lived too far to come if something went wrong. I reminded her I still walked every morning, still taught Sunday school, still could read the fine print on cereal boxes without glasses. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "You always were independent," she said. "That's what scares me. I should have known then." But mothers, real ones and chosen ones, we make excuses until the silence swells too loud to ignore. When I asked Alan about it on one of our rare phone calls, he said, "Mel means well. She's just worried." I asked if he thought I needed help, and there was a pause long enough to tell the truth, even if he never said it. "She just wants to make sure you're okay," he finally said. I think it's nice she's stepping up. I didn't say what I wanted to, that love dressed in condescension feels like a hand on your shoulder just before it pushes you down. That week, Melanie came by with grocery bags I didn't ask for and started rearranging the pantry without a word. She labeled shelves, threw out the jelly I liked because it was past the expiration date by 4 days, and replaced my chipped teacups with sleek white ones from a home goods store. Minimalism, she called it. Fresh start. The house felt quieter afterward. Cleaner. Maybe. But not mine. I noticed things disappearing slowly. My old address book. The sun-faded quilt George's mother made. A box of postcards from students. Gone from the bottom drawer. Oh, Melanie said when I asked. I thought they were trash. Trash. Memories. Effort. Years. One afternoon, I walked into the guest room and found a young couple standing there, whispering. Melanie was behind them, smiling like a hostess. Just showing the space, she said. And then, to them, imagine this as a nursery. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The couple left soon after, and Melanie waved them off like old friends. Real estate's hot right now, she said. No pressure. Of course. Just looking at options. That night, I sat in the hallway where George once lined up candles for my birthday. I stared at the patch of wall where Melanie had written, I'm sorry in pencil after breaking my mother's vase. I never erased it. I traced the letters with my finger and whispered, I forgave you then. But maybe she had forgotten what being forgiven even meant. A week later, she handed me a stack of folders, medical records, tax papers, insurance, and asked me to sign a simple update. Just routine, she said, pointing at the little flagged tabs. Her voice was gentle, rehearsed. I didn't read closely. I was tired. I signed. That was the day the ground shifted and I didn't even feel it. The day I gave away more than my signature. I gave away the last piece of authority I had over my life. And she didn't yell, didn't argue. She just smiled, packed the papers, and said, We'll talk more after your retirement party. Party. There was no party. Just a cake and an empty lounge and a woman holding a key to a door she never meant for me to open again. That night, I tried calling Alan, but it went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what to say. Your sister is selling my house sounded like a bad dream. I'm not ready to be forgotten sounded even worse. So I sat in my armchair with a blanket around my knees and listened to the wind outside tapping against the windows. Like it too was asking to be let in. And I realized something simple and sharp: they weren't pushing me out with shouts. They were replacing me with kindness. They didn't tell me to leave, they just planned a future I wasn't part of. The morning it happened, the sun filtered through the curtains like it always did, casting soft stripes of light across the kitchen table. The same table where I had once sat with George drinking weak coffee and dreaming about tomatoes we'd never plant. The table where Melanie once spilled orange juice all over her geometry homework and cried until I tore a page from my notebook and rewrote the answers with her. The same table I had polished every Saturday for 32 years now cleared, empty, sterile. Melanie walked in holding a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You might want to pack a few essentials today, she said, her voice light, like she was suggesting a picnic. I looked at her, confused. Essentials for what? She pulled out a folder from her oversized purse, opened it, and laid down a brochure like a dealer placing the first card. Seabreeze called. They've had a cancellation. You're lucky. Mom, there's a suite open with a garden view. I stared at the glossy photo. A woman with silver hair sat on a bench, laughing with a nurse beside her, a tree blooming pink behind them like a fairy tale. I blinked slowly. I never said I was going. Melanie tapped her pen against the table. You signed the POA. Alan agreed. This is the best decision for everyone. Her tone was firm, not cruel, just done. I opened my mouth to protest, to remind her that I wasn't sick, wasn't fragile, that I still remembered how to roast a chicken and prune a rose bush. But before I could say a word, she had already turned toward the hallway, calling over her shoulder. "I've already started boxing up the guest room." I stood. My knees felt foreign, stiff. I walked to the living room and saw them boxes, sealed, labeled. Nora's winter coats, hallway frames, linens donate. My heart thudded, not like a drumbeat, but like a door slamming. In the corner sat a single suitcase. Mine, not the red one I used when George took me to Charleston for our 10th anniversary. Not the floral one with the broken zipper I kept under the bed, no. This was new, neutral, untouched. It looked like it belonged to someone else. "Where's the quilt?" I asked. Melanie didn't look up. It was old, smelled musty. I tossed it. My breath caught. "That was your father's, his mother's." She shrugged. It was time. Time. Time for what to erase me piece by piece to make room for a future where I didn't exist. Alan hadn't come. He'd sent a text that morning. "Sorry I can't be there." "Trust Mel. She's doing what's right." "What's right?" I stared at my name written in black Sharpie across the suitcase handle. Not Mom, not Nora, just a label, a task. Melanie tapped her watch. "We should go soon. Traffic gets bad." I wanted to scream, to grab the boxes and rip them open, to run to the attic and cling to the beam George carved our initials into. But instead, I walked slowly to the mantel, picked up one photo frame, just one me and George on our wedding day, his tie crooked, my smile too wide, and I slipped it into my purse. That was all I was allowed to bring. My house, my history, my heartbeat reduced to one suitcase and a glossy brochure. The ride was silent. Melanie drove. Her nails tapped against the steering wheel to the rhythm of some pop song I didn't recognize. I watched the town blur past the diner where George and I had our first date, the bookstore where I used to take Melanie every summer, the church where Alan was baptized, all shrinking behind us like parts of a life being folded away. When we pulled into the Seabreeze driveway, my chest tightened. Beige walls, no trees. A fake fountain burbled in the center like it was trying too hard. A woman in lavender scrubs came out to greet us. "Nora, we've been expecting you." I hated how she said my name. Too bright, too rehearsed like a character in a children's play. I followed them inside. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and lemon air freshener. The carpet was too thick. The silence was heavy. My room had a twin bed, a dresser, a single window facing a brick wall. No garden, no view. The photo of me and George sat beside the lamp like a consolation prize. That night, I sat on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling until the shadows swallowed the corners. I didn't cry. I pressed a pillow to my face and let the silence do the weeping. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. I wasn't being taken care of. I was being shelved, filed away into a system that looked clean and polite but was built for forgetting. They hadn't stolen my home. They had sold the idea that I didn't belong there anymore. And worst of all, I almost believed them. They didn't evict me. They just made staying feel impossible. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was, not the peaceful kind. Not the hush of morning dew or the pause before a kiss, but the kind of silence that creeps into your bones, wraps around your lungs, and makes you forget what laughter sounded like. My room at Seabreeze smelled of lemon cleaner and old regrets, a twin bed pressed against the wall, a dresser that had seen too many names carved into its surface, and a single window facing a brick wall that swallowed the sun by noon. They said I was lucky it had a private bathroom, a decent view if I leaned just right. I leaned once. That was enough. I spent the first week pretending it was temporary. I arranged my books on the shelf alphabetically. I folded my cardigans by color. I placed the photo of George on the nightstand and turned it ever so slightly each night like a ritual, like he might look back at me if I just found the right angle. But the rituals faded, one by one. The cardigans stayed in drawers, the books remained unopened, and George stayed silent. The meals came on schedule, lukewarm and colorless, trays labeled with names as if we were specimens in a study. I sat at table 6 with 2 women who never spoke and a man who only asked for salt. I ate slowly, deliberately, not because I enjoyed it, but because chewing was the only sound I could control. Sometimes I skipped breakfast just to see if anyone would notice. No one did. Nurses came and went, kind enough but rushed, their smiles folding at the edges like paper cranes damp from rain. "Doing okay, Nora?" they'd ask, without stopping already halfway down the hall before I could answer. So I stopped answering. I stopped speaking altogether. It was easier that way. Safer. I became a fixture, something that existed but no longer demanded presence. I began to measure time by the flicker of the hallway lights, by the shuffle of slippers outside my door, by the moment the sun disappeared behind the bricks. There was a rhythm to invisibility. Some people resisted. I surrendered. My hands remembered the feel of dirt, of garden soil and rosemary stems, but now they curled in my lap, empty. My feet used to move through classrooms and kitchens and church aisles, but now they barely touched the floor. I called Alan once, just once. It rang 5 times. Voicemail. I hung up without speaking. I didn't know what I would have said anyway. "Are you still my son? Did you know what she planned? Why didn't you come?" I wrote him a letter in my head that night, line after line of things I'd never mail. Outside, a seagull cried into the dusk, the sound too wild for a place like this. I watched its wings blur against the sky and wondered if it remembered the way home. One evening, a woman named Carol wandered into my room by mistake. She thought it was hers. Her hands trembled as she looked around, confused, eyes wide. I said nothing, just helped her back to the hallway, walked beside her until a nurse came. She never said thank you. The next day, they changed her meds. No one mentioned it again. But I kept thinking about the way she looked at the bed, at the photo on my nightstand, as if trying to remember where she fit in the world. I understood, deeply. I stopped wearing makeup, stopped brushing my hair. No one noticed. One day, I sat on the floor for no reason at all. I stayed there for hours, knees bent, back against the dresser, staring at the seam between the tiles. It felt grounding, like maybe if I got low enough, I wouldn't fall any further. That night, I whispered my own name just to hear it aloud. Nora. Nora Whitfield. It sounded like someone I used to know, like a woman who once had purpose, who once believed that loyalty meant permanence, who once thought love was enough. I picked up the photo of George, held it close, and for the first time said out loud, "I'm not okay." The words were soft, like breath against a window, but they cracked something open. The next day, I asked a nurse what day it was. She blinked, surprised. "Wednesday," she said, before moving on. That was it, but it was something, a beginning, a crack in the wall I'd built around myself. I wasn't ready to rise, not yet, but I had finally stopped sinking, and that, in its quiet way, was a kind of defiance. They didn't tell me to disappear. They just stopped seeing where I sat. It was a Tuesday when Celia came. Not that the day mattered. Days had started to blur into each other like brushstrokes in a painting I didn't ask to be part of, but I remember it was raining, that slow, steady kind of rain that makes everything feel like memory. I heard her voice before I saw her, firm and floral, the way old friends sound when they still remember your middle name. "I'm here for Nora Whitfield," she said to the nurse at the front desk, and the way she said it, not like she was requesting, but reclaiming, sent a flicker through me I hadn't felt in weeks. She walked in wearing a yellow raincoat 2 sizes too big, and holding a bag that looked like it had survived a war. Her hair was streaked silver, tied back in a way that made her look like she still taught protest songs to children. Celia hadn't changed much. She looked at me, sitting small in a chair that swallowed my shoulders, and her eyes didn't flinch. She crossed the room, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "Still stubborn as hell, aren't you?" I tried to laugh, but it cracked in my throat. She pulled back, rummaged through the bag, and brought out a small velvet box. "You gave this to me in 1976, she said. Said every woman should have something beautiful that wasn't tied to anyone else." I opened it slowly. Inside was the silver Kai-Ao, an antique, shaped like a falling leaf with a tiny opal in the middle. I remembered buying it at a flea market after my first paycheck as a teacher. I had worn it every week until the day I gave it to Celia when she moved out of state, whispering, "For strength, not style." Now, nearly 50 years later, it sat in my palm like a heartbeat. I closed my fingers around it and for a moment forgot where I was. Celia leaned in, her voice lower. "You gave up everything for that girl, Nora, but she doesn't own you, and I think you've forgotten what that feels like." I wanted to deny it, to say I had chosen this, that I wasn't broken, but I couldn't lie to the one person who knew me before the world did. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a stack of papers, a manila folder thick with tabs and highlighter. "I talked to someone," she said. "An old friend who still practices law. Barely." He pulled the property records. Your house is still in your name. The deed's never been transferred. You signed over medical decisions." "Sure, but the title, still yours." My breath caught. Melanie said I began, but she cut me off. Melanie lied. She said it plain. No venom. Just truth laid flat between us like an open book. I shook my head slowly, trying to piece together the years of trust, of signatures I hadn't read, of smiles that had masked quiet theft. "I let her in," I whispered. "I let her take care of everything." Celia touched my hand. "Letting someone in doesn't mean handing them the keys to your life." Outside, the rain thickened, tapping against the windows like applause. I stared at the folder, at the weight of it, the proof that I hadn't imagined everything, that I hadn't fully disappeared. I hadn't been thrown away. I had been misplaced, deliberately, strategically, but not irreversibly. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid on the stiff mattress with the Kai-Ao in my fist, and for the first time since George died, I prayed. Not for peace, not even for strength. I prayed for clarity, for a door, a crack, a hinge, and maybe, just maybe, the courage to walk through it. When I closed my eyes, I saw the garden, overgrown but waiting. I saw the hallway light in my old house flickering the way it used to when George would forget to replace the bulb. I saw my name on the mailbox, smudged but still there. I saw who I used to be, and I knew I wasn't gone. I was just not finished yet. They didn't say I was powerless. They just counted on me forgetting how to reach for it. I didn't pack much. Just one cardigan, the Kai-Ao from Celia, my old checkbook, and the manila folder with the truth folded inside. I left the photo of George on the nightstand, not because I was leaving him behind, but because I knew I'd carry him in places no suitcase could reach. That Friday, the air outside Seabreeze was thick with the scent of cut grass and early spring, and as Celia pulled up in her beat-up sedan, I didn't look back. We didn't speak during the drive. The silence between us was full, but not heavy, the kind of quiet that grows between women who've seen each other fall and get back up again. When we pulled into the street where my house stood, I thought for a moment we had the wrong place. The flower beds were gone, replaced by fresh mulch and young boxwoods, like a stranger had redrawn my memories in tidy lines. The porch swing had been removed. New blinds covered the windows. The front door had been painted navy blue, erasing the sun-bleached green George and I chose one rainy Saturday just to feel spontaneous. But the shape of the house, the curve of the driveway, the crack in the third step that was mine, that would always be mine. There were 2 cars in the driveway. One I recognized, Melanie's silver SUV. The other, a sleek black sedan with dealership plates. Celia cut the engine. I stepped out slowly, pressing my palm against my thigh to still the tremble. "You sure?" she asked, but I was already walking toward the porch. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, I heard voices, Melanie's, professional and upbeat, and a man's voice responding with interest, casual and full of money. I stepped into the house like a ghost stepping back into her skin. The walls had been painted. My furniture was gone. The air smelled like fresh paint and staged candles. The dining room table I had refinished with George was nowhere in sight. In its place stood a cold glass top with chrome legs. In the corner, Melanie stood with a man in a suit, both holding coffees and folders. Her back was to me. "The listing price is aggressive but fair," she said. "The market's hot. And the seller—" She turned. Her face froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. "Is right here," I said, calm as a winter lake. The man looked between us, confused. "I'm sorry. I'm Nora Whitfield," I said, "owner of this home. You're standing on my floor." Melanie stepped forward, her face 1,000 shifting masks. Surprise, irritation, calculation. "Mom, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I said, and reached into my bag, pulling out the folder. I placed it on the kitchen island like a chess move that ends the game. The deed, my name, no transfer, no sale. The man took a step back. Melanie's voice dropped to a whisper. "We can talk about this later." "No," I said. "We're talking now." She tried again, softer this time, the way she used to ask for money in college. "You don't understand. You're not well. You're tired." I met her eyes and said the words I never thought I'd say. "I'm not tired. I'm finished. Finished letting you make decisions for me. Speak for me. Erase me in soft tones and scented brochures." The man cleared his throat. "I think I'll give you two a moment." He slipped out the door like smoke. Melanie's shoulders dropped. "I was trying to help." "No," I said. "You were trying to inherit something that wasn't yours yet. You wanted my house more than you wanted my presence." Her lip trembled. "That's not fair. Neither was boxing up my life like it was clutter. Neither was signing papers for a future you had no right to plan." She opened her mouth again, but I raised my hand, gently, like calling time in a classroom. "Stop. Just stop." The silence that followed was the cleanest breath I had taken in years. I walked through the rooms one by one. Living room, kitchen, hallway. I touched the wall where George once leaned while watching me dance to the radio. I knelt beside the baseboard where Melanie once drew a tiny heart in crayon and claimed she didn't do it. I walked out to the backyard where the soil still remembered my hands. And when I came back inside, I stood in the center of the room and said, not with anger, not with heat, but with truth. This house is mine, and so is the choice of what I do next. Melanie didn't follow me. She stood frozen near the door, unsure of who she was if I stopped being her silent backdrop. I didn't need her answer. I had found my own. That evening, Celia and I sat on the porch steps, sipping tea from paper cups, the spring air soft against our faces. She looked at me and smiled. "Told you," she said. I smiled back. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. "No," she said. "You didn't need to. You came back like a storm, quiet, but nothing stood in your way. And for the first time, I felt it, not revenge, not pride, but something deeper. Return, not just to a house, but to myself. I didn't reclaim my home with rage. I just walked back in like I never left. I found it by accident, like most things that matter, quietly, without ceremony, hidden in the back of the hall closet beneath a stack of old linen I hadn't touched in years. I was looking for the sewing kit, or maybe I wasn't really looking at all, just wandering the house now that it was mine again, tracing old routines like footsteps on worn floorboards. The envelope was yellowed, the edges curled, and the handwriting on the front made me stop breathing for a moment. George's handwriting, still looped and crooked in the way only his hand could be. It said simply, "For Nora. When the silence becomes too loud, I sat on the hallway floor right there, legs folded like I used to as a girl, and opened it with the care of someone handling something alive. Inside were 6 pages, written in blue ink, dated over 5 years, each one more hesitant than the last. I read them all slowly, with both hands pressed to the paper like I could feel the weight of his voice. The first letter was gentle, filled with musings about the garden, how proud he was of me for staying steady, how he knew I carried more than I let on. The second was harder. He wrote about Melanie, how he noticed her sharpening edges, how she spoke to me sometimes like I was a clerk at a store, not a mother. He said he tried to talk to her once, but she brushed him off. She respects you, he wrote, but she doesn't understand what it cost you to love her. The third letter chilled me. He recounted a conversation he overheard between Melanie and Alan, something about making plans for the house, something about how Mom won't need that much space soon. This was before his first heart episode. He wrote, I should confront them, but I'm afraid. Afraid if I push too hard, they'll walk away and you'll be left cleaning up that loss. 2. I could feel his guilt in every sentence like smoke rising from a fire he didn't put out. By the 4th letter, his handwriting had started to shake. He told me he saw how tired I was, how I carried everything in silence, how sometimes I looked at Melanie with a kind of quiet ache he couldn't fix. You still hope, he wrote, and that's the hardest part. You still think she'll choose you back someday. The 5th letter was short, just 3 lines. I'm sorry for leaving this mess. I know you'll survive it, but I hate that you'll have to. And then the last one, no date, just his name at the end signed slowly, as if he knew it would be the last time he wrote anything at all. Ellie. It began, he only ever called me that in private. If you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared. And I want to say this clearly. You are not weak. You are not forgotten. You are not old news or a burden or a body to be managed. You are the bravest person I've ever known. And if they've pushed you aside, if they've taken the house or tried to rewrite the years you stand up, you fight. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your name. Take it back, all of it, take it back and live. I don't remember crying. Not really. It was like something deeper cracked open, something beneath tears, beneath breath. I sat there with the pages spread across my lap, hands trembling, chest aching, but not from grief, from recognition. He knew. Even then, he knew what I hadn't wanted to admit, that loving them wouldn't be enough to make them stay gentle, that motherhood doesn't always come with return receipts, that sometimes your only power left is the truth you've buried. I held the last letter to my heart like a shield, like armor I didn't know I was allowed to wear. George had never raised his voice, never made grand speeches, but he had seen me, really seen me, even when I had gone quiet, even when I had forgotten how to raise my own eyes. I stood up slowly. My legs were stiff, but my spine had found something against steel, or maybe fire. I walked to the kitchen, made tea with the kettle we'd bought in our 3rd year of marriage, and laid the letters on the counter in a neat stack. Melanie's voice still echoed in the house, faint now, powerless. Alan hadn't called. I didn't care. George had. From somewhere beyond memory, beyond fear, he had called me back to myself. And I had listened. They didn't steal my voice. I just forgot where I'd buried it until he handed it back. The day I decided to open the door was unremarkable in every way. No thunder, no signs, no letter in the mail, just a Tuesday morning with soft sun slipping through the window above the sink and the smell of toast I'd made just for me. No one to impress, no one to wait for. I stood barefoot in the middle of the kitchen and realized for the first time in years that there was nothing stopping me from making the house mine again, not just on paper, but in air, in feeling, in the way a place breathes when someone truly lives in it. I started by taking down the stiff white blinds Melanie had installed and letting the light spill in like forgiveness. I pulled the chairs back into the places they belonged, not symmetrical, not polished, just how George liked it, slightly off-center like a conversation you don't want to end. I didn't buy new things. I didn't renovate. I brought back old ones from the attic, threadbare curtains with tiny birds on them, chipped mugs that once held Sunday coffee, a quilt Celia helped me stitch in '92 with blues that had faded into kindness. And then I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I left the front door unlocked. Not carelessly, not as a mistake. I left it open the way some people leave a lamp in the window, not expecting anyone, but still hoping that if someone lost stumbles past, they'll know where the warmth lives. A week later, someone knocked. I wasn't expecting it. The knock was soft, uncertain, like the hand behind it had changed its mind halfway through. When I opened the door, she stood there, Emily. Melanie's daughter, my granddaughter, 16 now, taller than I remembered, shoulders curled in like apology. She held a paper grocery bag with something wrapped in cloth inside, and eyes that looked just like her mother's before the coldness grew. "Hi," she said, almost too quietly. I wasn't sure if you'd—" and she didn't finish. I stepped back without a word. She walked in like someone entering a church, her gaze flicking across the familiar things she didn't realize she remembered. We sat at the table. She placed the bag between us. Inside was a photograph, one I hadn't seen in years, me, holding her on the porch steps, her tiny arms around my neck, a smear of birthday cake on her cheek, and joy so big in my face I almost didn't recognize myself. "I found it," she whispered, "in Mom's drawer, buried under bills." She looked down. I didn't know what happened. I just knew one day I wasn't allowed to call you anymore. And then I found the podcast. And then the letters. And then I couldn't unsee it. Her voice broke. "I'm sorry, Grandma." I reached across the table and took her hand. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I also didn't say it was too late, because it wasn't. "You're here," I said. "That's enough." For the rest of the afternoon, we talked about George, about the garden, about the scarf Emily had kept all these years because I gave it to her once in a thunderstorm and told her it was a cape. She said she still wore it when things felt hard. That night, she stayed for dinner. I made soup, and she chopped vegetables like she used to do, standing on a step stool beside me. The silence between us was new now, not heavy, but full, the kind that rests between people who are starting again. Over the next few weeks, others came, women I'd taught with, a neighbor I hadn't seen in 5 years, a woman named Jean who said she read about me online and just wanted to say thank you. I listened. I served tea. I wrote down names and stories and handed out my number without hesitation. One woman cried on the porch for 20 minutes before speaking. Another left a letter in the mailbox with no return address. I didn't chase any of them. I just kept the door open. And then one morning, Emily turned to me as we folded laundry and said, "What if we made this bigger?" I looked at her. "Bigger? What if this house wasn't just your house again?" she said. "What if it was ours, not just ours, but a place for women like you, like us, who got pushed out and need somewhere to return to, even if it's not their original home, just somewhere they don't have to knock so hard?" I stared at her, at this young girl who once disappeared from my life without goodbye, who now stood in my kitchen reimagining everything I thought was lost. And for the first time, I didn't feel like someone trying to remember who I was. I felt like someone becoming something new. I poured us both coffee, handed her a pen, and we sat down with a notepad. She wrote at the top in loopy letters, "The quiet porch, a place to return to." And I knew this house wasn't just a house anymore. It was a beginning. They didn't change the locks. They just assumed I wouldn't come back with a key of my own. The porch creaked beneath our chairs as the last of the sunlight dipped below the trees, casting golden ribbons across the yard we had started to tend again, Emily and I, with our mismatched gloves and sore backs, planting marigolds and mint in soil that still remembered kindness. A soft breeze stirred the chimes by the door, and in that moment, I realized I hadn't felt afraid in weeks. Not of being forgotten, not of being replaced, not of being too old to matter. I watched Emily scribble into a notebook balanced on her knees, sketching out floor plans and names of women she hoped would come through the door someday. She was talking about partnerships, maybe a grant, maybe converting the garage into another bedroom. Her words poured forward with the certainty of someone who had stopped apologizing for dreaming. I didn't interrupt. I just watched her, the way her brow furrowed like George's, the way her fingers tapped the pen against the page when she got excited. This girl, once taken from me by silence and paperwork and someone else's decisions, had returned not as a child, but as a force. And somehow, somewhere along the way, I had too. The house no longer echoed, it answered, with footsteps, with laughter, with stories whispered over tea. I'd started writing again, not for publication, not for legacy, but for truth. I wrote about what it means to be loyal to people who forget you, what it costs to stay quiet, what it gives back when you choose yourself anyway. I wrote about George and Celia and the cold bed at Seabreeze and the warm weight of that silver Kai AO in my palm when everything else had slipped away. I wrote about returning not to the past, but to a version of myself that never stopped waiting behind the noise. And I wrote one sentence that kept repeating itself, over and over like a song in the bones. They didn't end my story, they just skipped a few chapters they didn't know how to read. Emily looked up and smiled. Do you think